When Edward Marshall, a 55-year-old multimillionaire, dined at the most exclusive restaurant in Miami, the last thing he expected was for a 25-year-old black waitress to approach him and say, "Excuse me, sir, but my mom has a ring just like yours." Edward glanced at his engagement ring, a family heirloom passed down for generations, and felt the world grind to a halt. Only 3 rings like it existed. One was on his finger, another had vanished 27 years ago, and the third was supposed to be buried with the woman he'd loved and lost forever. Miami, November 2025. The Coral Reef, a high-end restaurant in Miami's vibrant South Beach, was where the city's elite gathered: tech moguls, real estate tycoons, and celebrities. Edward Marshall, a 55-year-old hotel magnate whose luxury resort empire was valued at $750 million, sat alone at his usual table by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. With his silver hair neatly styled, a tailored Armani suit worth $4,000, and a gold watch glinting on his wrist, Edward was the picture of success. But his eyes carried a quiet sorrow. On his left hand shone a one-of-a-kind ring, white gold, with a sapphire center stone, encircled by diamonds. It was a 200-year-old family relic, a symbol of legacy and loss. Edward was there to mark the 20th anniversary of the resort chain he'd built with his late wife, Camille. The celebration felt hollow without her. Camille had died in a boating accident off the Florida Keys 5 years earlier, leaving Edward with a void no amount of wealth could fill. The ocean breeze carried the faint sound of live jazz from the restaurant's lounge, mingling with the clink of champagne glasses and murmured conversations. "More wine, Mr. Marshall?" a soft voice asked. Edward looked up to see a young black waitress, about 25, with warm brown eyes and a shy smile. Her natural hair was styled in a neat updo, and her crisp white shirt and black vest were immaculate, the uniform of the Coral Reef's elite staff. Her name tag read Maya. "Yes, please," Edward replied, his voice distant. As Maya poured the Pinot Noir, he noticed her gaze linger on his hand, her expression shifting to one of quiet shock. "Is something wrong?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Maya hesitated, her fingers tightening around the wine bottle. "Sorry, sir, but can I ask about your ring?" Edward glanced at his hand, surprised. "My ring?" "Yes," Maya said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "It's just, my mom has a ring exactly like it." Edward felt like he'd been struck by lightning. His breath caught, and he stared at the young woman, searching her face for any hint of a mistake. "That's impossible," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This ring is one of a kind. It's been in my family for generations." "I know it sounds crazy," Maya said, her eyes wide with nervousness, "but when I saw it, I nearly dropped my tray. It's identical to the one my mom's worn my whole life." Edward's heart pounded. Only 3 rings like this existed, crafted by his great-grandfather in 1825 for his 3 children. Edward wore one, inherited from his father. The second had disappeared 27 years ago when his twin brother, Charles, died in a climbing accident in the Rockies. And the third— "What's your mother's name?" Edward asked, his voice trembling. "Camille Jackson," Maya replied. "Why, do you know her?" Edward's world tilted. His Camille, his late wife, had been Camille Marshall, not Jackson. She'd died 5 years ago. He'd stood at her memorial, watched her casket lowered into the ground. "How old is your mother?" he asked, struggling to keep his composure. "She's 49, Maya said, frowning. "Mr. Marshall, you're looking really pale." Edward's mind raced. If Camille were alive, she'd be 49, but that was impossible. He'd grieved her, rebuilt his life around her absence. "Maya," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need a favor. Can you show me a picture of your mom?" Maya looked confused but pulled out her phone, scrolled through her photos, and handed it to him. Edward stared at the screen, and time stopped. It was Camille. His Camille. Alive. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray, but those green eyes, that radiant smile, the way she tilted her head, it was her. Edward gripped the phone, hands shaking. "This woman," he said, pointing at the screen. "Where does she live?" "Key West," Maya said, her voice tinged with concern. "Why? Do you know her?" Edward stood abruptly, knocking over his wine glass. The crimson liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a wound. Other diners glanced over, whispering, "Maya, I need you to tell me everything about your mom. Everything." "Mr. Marshall, you're freaking me out," Maya said, stepping back. "What's going on?" Edward sat down, forcing himself to breathe. "I'm sorry. Your mom, she looks like someone I knew a long time ago." Maya hesitated, then spoke, her voice cautious. "Her name's Camille Jackson. She's lived in Key West since I was a kid. She used to be a real estate agent, but retired early a couple of years ago after selling a big property." "And your dad?" Edward asked, his throat tight. "I don't have one," Maya said. "Mom says he died when I was a baby, a construction accident." Edward's skin prickled. He'd been an architect before pivoting to hotels, and 27 years ago, he and Camille had staged his death in a construction site collapse to escape a dangerous business deal. "What was his name?" he pressed. "Mom never said much," Maya replied. "Just that he was an architect, died when a building collapsed during a project in Atlanta." Edward's stomach churned. That was the exact cover story they'd used. "Maya," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "When's your birthday?" "April 10th, she answered. "Why all these questions?" Edward did the math. If Maya was 25, she was born in April 2000, 9 months after the last time he'd seen Camille alive before her supposed death. "My God," he whispered. "It can't be." "What can't be?" Maya asked, her voice sharp with worry. Edward looked at her, really looked at her. Now that he knew what to see, the resemblance was uncanny. His nose, his high cheekbones, the way her hands moved when she spoke. "Maya," he said, his voice breaking, "did your mom ever mention a man named Edward?" She frowned. "Not really. Sometimes when she's had a glass of wine, she'll mention an Eddie and get sad, but she never talks about him." Edward's eyes burned with unshed tears. Camille was alive. And if his suspicions were right, Maya was his daughter. "I have to see your mom," he said, standing again. "Right now. Mr. Marshall, it's 10 p.m. and Key West is a 4-hour drive," Maya said, alarmed. "What's going on?" "I'll pay you $2,000 to come with me," Edward said. "I just need you to take me to her." Maya stared at him, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but if you're crazy, I'm calling the cops." Edward managed a shaky smile. "If I'm crazy, you can call whoever you want." The black Tesla Model S sped along the overseas highway toward Key West, the ocean shimmering under the moonlight. Maya sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, still uneasy but curious. "Can you explain what's going on?" she asked. Edward kept his eyes on the road, the hum of the electric engine underscoring his words. 5 years ago, my wife Camille died in a boating accident, or so I thought. Now, your mom's name, her age, the ring, your birthday, it all lines up." "You think my mom is your wife?" Maya asked, incredulous. "I don't know what to think," Edward admitted, "but I need to find out." They arrived in Key West at 2 a.m., the streets quiet except for the distant strum of a guitar from a late-night bar. Maya led Edward to a pastel-colored bungalow tucked behind a row of palm trees. She knocked softly. "Mom, it's Maya." The door opened, revealing a woman in a cotton robe, her hair tousled from sleep. Edward's heart stopped. It was Camille, alive. Her green eyes widened and the color drained from her face. "Edward," she whispered. "Hello, Camille," Edward said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have a lot to talk about." Camille looked at Maya, panic in her eyes. "What have you done?" "Mom, is it true?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "Is he my dad?" Camille covered her face, tears spilling over. "Come inside," she said finally. This was always going to happen. In the cozy living room, decorated with seashell art and driftwood furniture, Camille sat on a wicker couch, a cardigan over her robe. Her eyes were red from crying. Edward sat across from her, Maya between them, the tension thick. "How long have you known I was alive?" Edward asked, his voice low. "Always," Camille admitted. "I never believed you died in that construction accident." Then why fake your death? Edward pressed, his hands clenched. Camille took a deep breath. Because I found out about your deals with Victor Torres. The money laundering, the threats. Edward stiffened. Victor Torres was a Miami crime lord he'd foolishly partnered with in his early days. How did you know? Victor came to me, Camille said. He said if I didn't disappear, he'd kill us both. I was 2 months pregnant, Edward. I couldn't risk our baby. Edward looked at Maya, his heart aching. Why didn't you tell me? Because you'd have fought him, Camille said, and we'd both be dead. Maya stood, her voice shaking. You're saying I've lived a lie for 25 years? You told me my dad was dead. I did it to protect you, Camille said, her voice breaking. I grew up thinking I was fatherless. Maya snapped, storming toward the door. I need air. She left, leaving Edward and Camille alone. The sound of waves crashing outside filled the silence. She looks like you, Camille said softly. She has your fire. And your heart, Edward replied, a sad smile tugging at his lips. Camille slipped off her ring and held it out. I guess this is yours. Edward shook his head. It's always been yours. I walked away from everything after you died, he continued. Sold the shady businesses, cut ties with Victor. He took the only thing that mattered, you. Camille's eyes softened. I'm glad you got out. Camille, Edward said, leaning forward. I know it's been years, but could we try again? She hesitated. We're not the same people, Edward. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we can build something new. The door opened and Maya returned, her face streaked with tears but calm. I've thought about it, she said. I want to know my dad, but there are rules. There. Name them, Edward said, his voice steady. No more lies, Maya said, ever. Done, Edward replied. I want to know you slowly, she continued. No rushing. Of course, Camille said. And promise me family comes before business, Maya said, her eyes fierce. Edward nodded. I swear. These past 5 years taught me money means nothing without family. Maya studied him, then nodded. Okay, we can try. Camille stood and hugged them both. Maybe it's not too late to be a family. 6 months later, the rooftop terrace of Edward's flagship resort in Miami Beach glowed with string lights, the skyline glittering against the night sky. It was Maya's 26th birthday, her first with both parents. The past 6 months had been a slow, beautiful journey of reconnection. Maya had quit her waitressing job and enrolled in a hospitality management program at the University of Miami, with Edward covering her tuition. Camille had moved to Miami, settling into a condo near Edward's penthouse, and they were cautiously rebuilding their relationship, one coffee date at a time. How's the dress? Maya asked, twirling in a coral sundress Camille had gifted her. Stunning, Camille said, adjusting Maya's seashell necklace. Edward approached, holding a small velvet box. Maya, I have something for you. She opened it to find a ring, not identical to theirs, but a modern take in rose gold with a smaller sapphire. I had it made for you, Edward said. It's part of our family, but it's yours. Maya slipped it on, tears spilling over. Dad, she said, the word feeling natural for the first time. Edward's eyes welled up. I love you, my girl. Camille joined the embrace, the three of them a fragile, hopeful unit. During dinner, Maya stood for a toast. 6 months ago, I thought I had no dad. Now I have a family. It's not perfect, but the best families aren't the ones that start flawless. They're the ones that choose to keep going. Edward raised his glass. To second chances. Camille lifted hers. To love that outlasts time. Maya smiled. To families found when you least expect them. 3 years later, Edward and Camille remarried in a small ceremony on a Key West beach, with Maya as maid of honor, walking her mother down the sandy aisle. Edward had donated most of his resorts to a charitable foundation, keeping just 2 for a comfortable life. Camille now ran the foundation, which reunited families separated by circumstance, turning their pain into purpose. Maya, fresh off her degree, managed one of the family resorts, blending her father's business savvy with her mother's compassion. One evening, as they dined on the balcony of their Miami home, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and jasmine, Maya raised her wine glass. You know what's wild about all this? What? Edward and Camille asked in unison. It started with a ring, Maya said. If I hadn't been working that shift, if I hadn't noticed Dad's ring, we might never have found each other. Edward took their hands, his ring glinting beside theirs. Fate has a way of bringing families together. Camille smiled. Sometimes the most precious things show up when you stop looking. And sometimes, Maya added, happy endings come when you least expect them. Their story proved that love could survive decades of separation, that families could rebuild after years of necessary lies, and that miracles often arrived disguised as chance encounters in Miami's finest restaurants.